Hello, and thank you all for coming to my ISM final presentation. I would like to extend a special thank you to my mentor, Ms. Pam Graham, for being an amazing mentor and really teaching me a lot about not only the field of speech and language pathology, but about how to be professional and how to conduct yourself in a way that's meaningful and will build relationships. I've really learned a lot this year. All right. A little bit about me. I'm a senior at Frisco High School, and this is my second year in ISM. Last year I studied developmental psychology. I am the oldest of three girls, and I have grown up my whole life learning about learning differences just because my family genetically just is learning different, and my whole life has been about learning and trying to understand and trying to help make things better for my sisters and how they learn. And so that's really what has, guided me through both years of my ISM experience. And I really can't thank my sisters enough for that, because I've really found a passion within learning the differences in psychology and everything to do with the brain. Oop, I don't know where that picture went. All right, last year I did study developmental psychology under the mentorship of Miss Jennifer Mulligan. She was a teacher at the Early Childhood School, which is a school here in Frisco ISD that is a preschool for children with learning differences or developmental delays. You have to, in order to get your child to attend there, you have to have them tested, and if they qualify for the types of services offered at each CS, they may go there. I had a very difficult time finding a mentor last year. I went on 7 interviews and I got 7 no's, and Coach Goff gave me the hookup with Miss Mulligan, and I learned more through getting rejected 7 times than I think I could have if I had gotten an acceptance the first time. And Miss Mulligan ended up being a great mentor, and I had a lot of experiences that were amazing, and I really just felt I grew a lot as a person last year. Even though I had difficulty finding a mentor, I came up and developed a product that I am still very proud of. My mentor told me to focus on autism in making a product because the needs of autistic children are it's a broad range, and there's a lot of points on the spectrum that you can focus on. And what I learned when I was doing my research is that children with autism have difficulty expressing emotion, and their neurons misfire so they don't feel oriented in space. So to help with this issue, I came up with the idea of weighted feeling puppets. What I did was I archetyped different colors that fit with different emotions, and I put expressions on these little puppets to help the children identify visually what they were feeling. And then the weighted component also helps soothe their hand and make them feel more at peace and able to communicate. With that, I also created a little script for parents to use when speaking to their child, just to help facilitate easier communication, because I have heard just from talking to different parents, just from my whole life, that it's really hard to kind of navigate where you are, and especially in that kind of process. So it went really well, and this summer I hope to maybe develop them further and maybe market them along with my product this year. And there's just a little close-up picture of them. All right, so I did a lot of research to help write assessments throughout the year, which is part of the curriculum in ISM. And I'm just going to define a term for everyone in case you don't know, because I know I will be using it a lot, especially as I talk about my original work and my product. Like I said, to get into the early childhood school, you have to have testing to qualify. Well, what you try to qualify for is an ARD, which stands for Admission, Review, and Dismissal. And all this testing goes on, and a board gets together with all different types of people that will come in and test your child, like a speech therapist or an occupational therapist or even a psychologist, and they will come together and they will say what the needs of your child are, and if they are past a certain point, your child qualifies for an ARD, and you get to have certain services through FISD, and that applies to getting certain types of speech pathology, which is why it's very applicable to my research. The first thing you learn in ISM is your job outlook, which is good because as you're working through the year, you kind of have to have that in the back of your mind to kind of gear how you're going to do your research and what you need to do to stay ahead of everyone else that's trying to look for jobs in the field. And especially in this district, the need for speech language pathologists is rapidly growing, which is amazing because I like to think that I'll have security right out of college, and that there's a great need, so that means that a lot of people will be willing to make space for me wherever their work may be, and I'll have options. I've also learned that the way speech therapy is administered in each country is different. That is only because that when you say certain words, in different languages, your tongue is used differently. So there's certain parts of your tongue, like when you look at the anatomy of your tongue, that are stronger if you speak different languages. So obviously when you're working on the speech part of speech language pathology, you need to know how the tongue rests in the mouth and how it, hits certain points in your mouth to make different sounds. And I thought that that was extremely important because, especially living in Texas, there's a lot of Spanish speakers. So it's very, beneficial to be bilingual when you are a speech language pathologist, just so you have a broader understanding, especially if you're going to be working with kids that speak another language. One of the greatest things about Texas education is that it is super advanced and everything's becoming pretty standard, which makes it easier for children to kind of move around, and it makes more of a unified front when approaching speech language pathology, which really helps with parent peace of mind as well as child, because their treatment and their goals aren't going to be changed much if they move around. And that is also feeding into integration, which is the child taking what they've learned in their therapy sessions and applying it and leading a successful life. It's really the most important part of speech language pathology, because you can talk and talk and talk and work and work and work with these children, but if they can't apply it to their life, then what was the point? And then lastly, what I really was interested in is, because I studied psychology last year, is how much of a role does psychology play in speech pathology? And really, psychology is a pretty major role in speech pathology, because a lot of these children that that have to go through the process are obviously different from what your standard average child is, and they're a little bit behind. This creates sometimes depression or like really bad self-confidence issues, and you really have to understand that, especially when you're treating children that have been teased. So that to really handle them with gentle, kind of a gentle approach, and so that that what they're going through is very difficult, and you have to be able to understand that to really help them along the way. So that was really the first semester. The first semester is lots of research and interviews, and I did 5 interviews. And actually, this was my I'm going to go a little bit out of order with interviews, just so I can talk about my mentor last. But my second interview was with Miss Anna Rotter. She is a speech language pathologist at Christie Elementary. I did not expect to have this interview with Miss Rotter, but my first interview with my mentor, Miss Graham, she was just walking by and she was excited to get to talk to me, so I got to go and interview her in her little classroom. And the biggest thing I learned while talking to Miss Rotter was that there's so much versatility in a speech language pathologist. She said that she has friends that they studied in college and they studied the exact same curriculum and they graduated with the exact same degree, but there's some people that are working in hospitals for traumatic brain injury patients, and there's some people working in geriatrics, and then she's working in a school. So that was really, really awesome for me to know that if I kind of get worn out in one section of speech language pathology, I can move to another and be completely renewed and revitalized. And there's not many professions you can say that you can do that with. So I think I got kind of lucky in kind of falling in love with this profession. My third interview was with Miss Katie Stoling. She is the co-lead speech language pathologist for Frisco ISD. She mainly works in admin and at Rogers Elementary. When we talked, it was so easy, and it was just like a conversation, and it was awesome. And she told me that especially because I've been in the program for now 2 years, she said to have an open mindset when going into college, that I don't want to limit myself as far as what I can do in the future. and she really just encouraged me to explore the entire field of speech pathology because it's so vast, but also to explore other fields so that I know exactly what I'm doing and what I want. And she said that the program has really given me a leg up on most college students because I already have an idea of what's out there just from my research and my interviews, and that just keep an open mind. And she just gave me lots of good life advice that was kind of tacked onto that, which was awesome. All right, and then my fourth interview was with Miss Brooke Johnson. She is a speech language pathologist in Louisville Independent School District at Coyote Ridge Elementary, and I actually got this interview through a fellow ISM student who happened to know her through her church. She was so fun. She was really upbeat and happy, and that was really a trend I saw with everyone that I interviewed, is that they were so happy and they couldn't stop talking about their job. They were so passionate, and it was so cool. It was really inspiring, and it really gave me motivation, and it really kind of, drove me forward into what I ended up doing, my original work and my product. She talked about, because her elementary school is a little bit bigger, her groups have, when she's not doing one-on-one, her groups have for, when they do group therapy and they pull them out of class, is anywhere from 8 to 10 children. And that's a lot for one speech pathologist, obviously, to try to observe and give accurate data as far as what's happening. And she just said that you have to be very observant and you have to be able to pay attention to a lot of different things at once, especially when you have little ones like kindergartners that are all over the place and talkative, and that data collecting is so important to the progression of a child's speech and how they're developing and growing. And it's also especially important when you're talking about an ARD, because goals are established when the ARD is being written after the child qualifies. And if you're not keeping accurate data, then when you have your annual review of your ARD, then they don't know what to tweak and to change and how to help the child for the next coming year. And obviously, so that provides the baseline for which all speech pathologists gear at least in Texas, how they gear what they do with their children in their public schools. And my fifth interview was with Miss Christina Martin. Coach Goff actually gave me her contact information because Coach Goff is really trying to encourage me to step outside of school speech pathology, and it was a really fun interview. She's a speech pathologist for people with traumatic brain injury at Baylor. She definitely emphasized the difference between school and kind of more medically based speech pathology. It's definitely more of as opposed to a tool for learning, your job is seen as more of a prescription. Because if if a patient is having difficulty speaking after having a traumatic brain injury, then a doctor comes in, evaluates them, and then says to the team of speech pathologists, okay, this is what this patient needs. And you get to work with an entire medical team, and that's actually really cool. And it's a lot of fast-paced work, and it's a different feel completely. But the one thing that is different is that there's unsure outcomes because you don't know what your patient and how they're going to respond to different types of treatment. And she said that's probably the hardest part of her job, and she has to really make sure that she is really focusing on just treating and not becoming emotionally attached. Okay, next I'm going to move on to my original work. I will talk about my mentor after my original work because I just feel that with all the data I'd collected from all my interviews, it fed more into my original work, which ended up being a data collecting sheet for speech language pathologists to use within schools. So what I did is I researched different data sheets that were already available because I was very aware that I wasn't inventing anything new like I had last year, which was kind of difficult for me to kind of gear and change. And but what I ended up doing is I had asked all the different people I interviewed and then my mentor what was the challenge associated with collecting data. And they all said because the children that have speech and language difficulties often have other difficulties just because the way your brain is wired is so complicated that your, different areas of your life are also affected. They said it's difficult for their children to kind of keep on task, and it's difficult for them to kind of understand what activities produced what kind of behavior, because if you're having a child that's totally not engaged in activity, there's no real work being done, and it's more difficult for progress to be made. So what I ended up doing is I made this data sheet. I have obviously their grade level, and there are dates, so you are able to kind of plan out what you want to get accomplished in a certain kind of calendar before their next ARD, so you know what to report back. And then I just have the different days of the week and different goals that they happen to be working on that week. I included 5, that's kind of excessive, especially if the child is littler. They'll try to keep the goals to more of a 2, 3 kind of range, just so as not to overwhelm the child. But I have an activity slot there where you can put what you were working on to achieve your goal, and there's like a key of how the activity went and how their progress is in achieving that goal, and if you can see over time if that activity is working or not. And then I also, what's new is I put a demeanor box where you can give little indicators of how the child was, and you can kind of make correlations to maybe activity or maybe what was going on that day. If it was a different day at school, how the child was reacting to whatever kind of activity and things you were working on. And I feel like that is especially important in reporting back to the ARD board, just so that they were able to correlate and kind of adjust accordingly, maybe if more testing was needed, if there were kind of strange emotional patterns that were arising from whatever you were doing, if they correlated or not with that work. And then I also, in addition to that, just kind of compiled a bunch of my research that I had been doing. I felt that a goal template was necessary just so I knew what you're kind of looking at when you're evaluating a student, what you're looking to correct or what you're looking to improve upon. And I also just created a list of terms that are used in everyday school kind of talk in evaluating a student, because I felt that I was coming in with less knowledge than I had about my topic last year, and I felt kind of almost insecure about the knowledge I had. And my original work was just making sure that I had firm ground to stand upon when I was going forward in my research. So you'll just see up there, it was just good for me to have it all in one place, and I referred back to it as I was making my product and as I was doing more work with my mentor. And I just had, sound, and it just really helped me kind of understand the field more, and it helps me kind of talk in a broader sense and understand more. And I really feel like after my original work was completed, I was able to kind of talk to my mentor and have more, questions, and it really helped expedite, I think, my process in learning about the things that I did. All right, now on to my mentor. My mentor was actually my very first interview of the year. She is the other co-lead speech pathologist for FISD, and she switches between admin and Christy. She works with bilingual students, which was really, really exciting when I found that out on our interview, because I was like, there's a whole new door that was open to me as far as learning about the field. She is so passionate about her job, and it is so very inspiring. Christie Elementary is the only elementary school in FISD that caters to bilingual students, and you have to qualify to go to that school if you're a bilingual student, and it really is just such a great kind of program to have in our school district, because it allows students to become proficient in 2 languages. And what I learned from Ms. Graham on our interview is that specializing in the field is something else that makes the field even bigger. I actually was able to meet a woman who specialized in fluency, which means stuttering, and she said that it's a great way to affect change on a really big scale, because you don't think about specializing as much as you do, but it's important in progressing in the field and understanding things more. And some of my mentor experiences, because I did get my mentor, and she agreed to be my mentor so graciously in the middle of December, so it was definitely more of a second semester experience when I got to meet with her. She was volunteering at the National Stuttering Association that Frisco ISD hosted, which was a really big deal because this organization is nationwide. And Frisco ISD sponsored it, and I got to work it, and I got to help all the speech language pathologists that were there, and I got to interact with all the kids, and I got to really have hands-on learning experience, and I learned a lot about stuttering. It is so fascinating, and I think my favorite part of that day was how resilient these kids are. And I loved hearing all their stories, and it was really awesome. And then she also gave me the opportunity to observe A Step Beyond, which is a program for the mentally disabled students in FISD. Once they graduate, they can go through this program and they can learn skills that help them get jobs in the future, which is so incredibly cool. Speech language pathologists work with them, and when they are working on the job, they help articulate what they're doing so they can understand and interact with employers. I was able to observe several group and individual therapy sessions through other speech language pathologists, which was cool because I got to see so many different styles of how people work with their students. And then I just got, in conjunction with that, is I got to partake in some speech testing. I got to administer some of it with, it was oral, but it was really fun. And Miss Graham being the co-lead, she has all these materials at her disposal, so I got to go through them. And of course, I got the grand tour of the special education department in the administration building at Frisco ISD, which is fun. All right, now on to my product. For my product, what I did is I was talking with my mentor, and because she does work with bilingual students and she does understand that part of speech language pathology, she told me there was a major gap in tools and resources for Spanish speaking students. She allowed me to go through all her different workbooks and all her different activities and games that she uses with these students, and she showed me the contrast between those resources and the resources she has for her English speaking students. And it's quite a big gap because most people don't think to include the students that are bilingual, but now that America is growing and there's a lot of people immigrating and it's becoming more mainstream to speak another language, I think it's very important to start catering to these needs on a more on a higher level kind of way that's going to affect more students. And she also told me that because these students are bilingual, it's tough for them to relate to their surroundings, which is the language part of speech and language pathology, is relating words to your surroundings, which helps you interact and develop in a healthy way. So I came up with the idea for a bilingual language building book that can be parent directed. In both my product last year and this year, I really wanted to incorporate an element where the parent is encouraged to get involved, because no matter who I talk to in just this kind of special education field that I've been studying, I learned that parent involvement is really paramount in a child feeling comfortable in their progress and really feeling acclimated to how they're relating to their surroundings. So I think it's really important, and I feel like I'm developing sort of like a stance now that I've had 2 years of experience in research on parent involvement. It's sometimes hard, especially with parents that have several children and multiple have special needs, for them to get involved because you don't really know how to approach it. There's not a lot of information out that makes it easy for a parent to get involved. Like, you can know all the terminology and you can know all the ins and outs, but how do you really help your child and how do you really affect change? That is also transferred into how do you help your child interact using their language. And so my language building book is multisensory learning. And if you don't know, when they tell you to study, they always tell you to like write out the notes and then read the notes aloud and then watch the PowerPoint, and that's because you're learning through different senses, and it just helps it stick in your brain that much more because you're experiencing it in multiple different ways. But it's the same information, so it's just staying there because it's a lot more prominent in your memory and in your like physical neurons and when you're doing it. So my language book is a tour around Frisco, and I thought it was adorable because especially students, because the district is growing so quickly, they're moving from different places, and the concept isn't super marketable obviously on a wide scale, but I thought it was cute to maybe use in Frisco. And what it does is there's pictures of different places around Frisco, and I have them up here. I just want to explain it before I put it up. It's pictures of different places around Frisco, and it's aimed for children ages 3 to 5, but it could easily be reworded and revamped to reach older children, but I geared my language and how I wrote my story to kids that are from 3 to 5 years old. And what it has them do, it has them look at the picture on the page, and then it's also a place they could actually go and physically experience. So you're getting that visual input, and then you could also get that kinesthetic input of actually going to the place. And then my story says, kind of gives a little description of what the place it depicted is, and then it also translates it into Spanish right underneath, so that both Spanish and English speaking students can have the same experience. And then also the Spanish speaking students can be learning English along with the parents. So it is not finished. I plan to have a glossary of terms at the very back that I use throughout the story that are translated, just so that maybe parents could rip that out and save that and use it for future reference, especially if English is not their first language. But at the end of all the pictures, you'll see that there's questions, and ideally, if like the book were ever published, it would be kind of perforated, and you could put them like in like a kind of card format, and you could put it on like a little binder ring, and you could take it around Frisco and you could ask these questions, and the child would have to come up with the answer based on what they had read and learned and saw in the picture and then were experiencing. And that is the integral part of the language part of speech and language pathology, is that they are able to use words to relate to their surroundings. And so I'll just kind of click through it really quickly. A day in Frisco. You see that I just have the language translated, and I do have to make some edits at this point. My Spanish, even though I took 4.5 years of it, kind of rocky. I'll be totally honest with you. But it was good for me in terms of learning Spanish again. So yeah, you just go on the playground, and these are all places that they could visit. Yeah. And then, you end, and here's where I want to talk about. It's the questions. What I tried to do is I tried to incorporate all the 5 senses somewhere within my questions, so that, point to the word Frisco, you have to physically look, and you have to see the word Frisco in the question, and then you actually have to see it in the picture, and you're drawing that parallel. And then I had a picture of the snow cone lady, and what's your favorite flavor of snow cone? That's incorporating that taste element. And I feel like with this product, even though it is super specific to Frisco, it really helps. I'll just throw my Spanish version up there. I think it really would help a child to be able to relate to their surroundings using all 5 of their senses while applying language to those senses, what they're seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. And that really helps kind of, that child like move forward and understand what they're, doing, seeing, whatever, and it really helps the parent interact with their child. And, I know my mom has said to me before, there's nothing to do in Frisco. I don't know what to do with you kids anymore. just a little bonus part of my product is now you have like 8 places you can go with your child, and you can apply the questions and have them bring them with them, and it's fun, and it's like travel, and then